I feel like I need to explain what we're watching today, I guess. You know what? I'm not going to explain it, but today we are watching something called Israel and the Arab States by Films Incorporated, publication date 1978. So, if you didn't know, the very first red thing I ever watched for this channel was about Palestine, but I wasn't able to release that for other reasons. The very first batch of videos we produced for this channel weren't that great, so we didn't ever get to air that, but I just want you guys to know that like this is very core to the purpose of this channel, is watching stuff like this, Israel and the Arab States. I'm so curious about what they have to say, and part of the reason why is because these issues are obviously still present to this day, so I'm curious to see how these issues are handled all the way back then. Obviously, what we're about to watch is probably propaganda. Actually, no, it's most definitely propaganda. I'm just curious about what angle this propaganda is coming from and what was actually said in propaganda back in the day to convince people of the, Zionism, I guess, or whatever whatever we're talking about here. I don't know if this is pro-Israel, anti-Israel. I don't know what the actual propaganda is here, but I think we all need to go into this aware that we are purposefully propagandizing ourselves by watching this. But the interesting thing is to dissect it and to understand why, whatever we learn about today, why those thoughts came from the people that they did, I guess. So today, Israel and the Arab States. We're probably going to have a lot to talk about. This is probably going to be a long one. And I'm really excited about it. I really think that this is what this channel was meant to do, is watch this sort of program. So without further ado, let's learn about Israel and the Arab States. I think it's to the benefit of mankind for me to be able to watch this and share my experience on the internet, mind you. I think that's like what makes this whole channel valuable, is being able to engage with this sort of stuff. So I don't pay that much attention to the legal notices, but let's just keep going. This is not what we're supposed to be focusing on. Okay, I thought Films Incorporated was just like a mistake or something, but I guess that's actually the film production company that made this program. So Films Incorporated, very plain name, made this. Again, it's important to understand who made this and in what context this was being shown, because again, this is most definitely propaganda. So even understanding the corporation behind the production of it is important for you to understand the purpose behind everyone's words. A BBC TV production. Okay, that's interesting. BBC TV. So this was not only made by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Channel, if I'm correct on that. Oh no. Yeah, I think that's it. But also BBC TV. So now this isn't just being shown to kids in school or something. I think this was actually airing on like television for a British audience, which is interesting. So even that, like the fact that we know the intended audience helps us understand the form of propaganda better. So more information, that's interesting. Let's keep going. Distributed in the USA by Films Incorporated. Distributed in Canada by BBC Enterprises. Okay, that's interesting too. So this wasn't a British audience. This was just made by the BBC for, I guess, the Anglosphere or something, I guess. Films Incorporated, a subsidiary of Public Media Incorporated. That's interesting too. I have not done any tracking down of any of these old corporations, but I'm curious how much connection this film studio had to like the Israeli state or whatever. Like where's the true propaganda coming from, I guess. Well, these are some, I guess, epilepsy warning for any of you guys who might be worried about that sort of thing. We're about to watch some flashing lights. This is actually some like really good cultural commentary already. Just these flashing images, like instantly recognizable. Didn't we see Mickey Mouse there for a second? Like that, a whole essay could be written just about the images that were being flashed on screen right now. There was Lenin, wasn't there? A dollar sign, was that Churchill? Mickey Mouse? A Target sign? A swastika? Okay. Oh, another, I don't know what those symbols are called, like the SS Lightning Brigade symbols. A Star of David. A Japanese imperial flag, a British flag, a Union Jack, I guess. Gandhi, I don't know what flag that was actually. That looks like an American flag, but oh, that was Mao. Is this like an airport symbol? I don't know what this is. Oh, this is like a peace symbol with an airplane on it. I don't know. Is this like a recognizable symbol for people from the 70s? I don't know. I'm not picking up any information from this besides peace and airplane. Oh, that was JFK. 20. Okay, I don't know what we're doing now. Oh, 20th century history. Interesting. So is this like the History Channel that we're about to watch? Dude, this music though, this is like the most intimidating sort of music. Like we're just in that like synth drone era of music.
This is about a small country in the Middle East.
I love the start of this. What a good map, too. Such a funny little, like, hand-drawn, traced map. Interesting map of Israel that we start off with, though. Obviously doesn't have the West Bank or Gaza. This country was in this form for so long. It's an interesting glimpse into the past already.
And its relationship with its neighbors.
Israel and the Arab states. Yeah, there you go.
Originally known as Palestine,
Originally known as Palestine, you don't say. I wonder what the slant on this whole thing is going to be.
British ruled it under a League of Nations mandate from 1922, after capturing it from the Turks in the First World War.
So that's interesting. So they're positing that the British got to do what they wanted to do with Palestine because they conquered it from the Ottomans back in World War I. I feel like that's an argument that, like, I don't know. I feel like no one's fighting on the side of like the British colonialists in this conflict, you know? Like I've never even heard like the reason the British were there, because I feel like the assumed reason is just because they were colonizing everywhere. They want to control over everything, like over all the trade routes and everything. So I never really thought about the British conquering Palestine because it was Ottoman territory. I guess that's just like a little interesting nugget of information that I guess I'll hang on to now. Again, is that part of the propaganda? Am I already drinking it, or is that just like a factual statement? I don't know. I mean, it must be factual a little, but it must be slanted towards in favor of Zionism or something. I don't know. I'm really going to try hard to not make myself look like such an idiot, because this subject material demands that I take this seriously.
Most of its population was Arab. They believed Britain had said that Palestine would be theirs. But the British had also promised the Jews a national home in Palestine.
So this is, the very, very beginning of the problem, is that the British just lied, I guess. I guess they made too many promises to too many people. They said that the Palestinians would eventually get to reclaim their land, but they also promised the Israelis that they'd give Palestine to them. So really, this is just Britain's fault. Like, I don't think this ever would have happened if the British did not colonize this area. You know, like, obviously there would have been regional disputes over the Holy Land, just like there's been for, like, the past 2,000 years. But the actual, like, establishment of the Israeli state is really just, like, the prerogative of the British at this point.
Making Jewish immigration easier was one of the conditions of the British mandate. And the Jewish population increased from about 80,000 in 1922
80,000 in 1922, all right?
to over 400,000 in
400,000, so it multiplied by a factor of 5. That's crazy. Again, were all these European Jews, when was this made? 1978? All right, so were these European Jews or were these African Jews? Also, can I just say that, like, I don't think the term Jew is offensive if it's used in the proper context. I'm going to probably say that a lot this episode. I don't think it's an offensive term. I grew up with Jewish people all my life. I've never heard anyone get offended over it. I feel like I just have to cover my bases a little. I'm not using this as like an offensive term at all.
1,000 in 1939. They worked hard to establish their farms and settlements throughout Palestine.
I like how, the first shot of them settling their farms throughout Palestine is them just setting up barbed wire. Like, that's very essential for a farm. Yes. I'm trying to keep animals out of my farm. Yes. Like, I don't think that the barbed wire is really to keep crows from settling on your fields.
But their arrival...
Dang, look at these old freaking hats, though. These old safari hats. That's how you know. That's how you know you're freaking in the colonial era.
But their arrival caused problems. The Palestinian Arabs bitterly resented ever-increasing...
Palestinian Arabs. See, it's interesting that they even refer to them as, like, Palestinian Arabs rather than just Palestinians or Arabs. It's like, I feel like, I don't know, I always thought that Palestinian Arabs were kind of just like Arabs. You know, I feel like before Israel settled in Palestine, this was just a continuous aspect of the Arab world. Like, no one ever saw the Palestinian Arabs as different sorts of Arabs as like the Egyptian or the Syrian Arabs. I could be wrong about that. Obviously, I bet everyone thought they were different from everyone else at a certain point, but I just feel like the Palestinian Arab thing only arose after this whole situation. Like, before this, you would have just thought of them as the plainest of Arabs, you know? You wouldn't have ever specified, oh, a Palestinian Arab, or a Syrian Arab, or a Lebanese Arab. You would have just called them all Arabs. But then you have this huge settler project, and now they're Palestinian Arabs.
Numbers of Jews in what they believed to be their country, and blamed the British. Amid mounting...
Yeah, I feel like the British have just gotten off, like, scot-free ever since this happened. Like, no one has ever even blamed them once for all this. Like, it's all been put on Israel after that. Which is sort of fair, but not really.
Arab hostility and rebellion, the British called a conference of Jews and Arabs in 1939.
Oh, man, who's this guy? Oh, man, I know him. Is his name Benjamin? Oh, it's something with like an E, isn't it? He's like the founding father of Israel, isn't he? I should know his name. I'm sorry that I don't. I'm exposing my lack of knowledge on this, but I know that he is like the founding father of Israel. Or at least I think he is. I really don't want to say that too confidently, but I'm pretty sure he's that guy.
Although the Jews were promised ultimate independence, the British announced a cutback in immigration over the next 5 years.
Crazy how, like, these guys meeting in this room is, like, still the cause of so much conflict even today. It's just, like, like, I don't even think these guys understood the gravity of the decisions that they were making in this room. Maybe they did, but, like, I don't think so. I don't think they ever envisioned that there would still be conflict in this region 100 years later. Maybe they did. I mean, I don't know.
Then it was to stop altogether, unless the Arabs agreed.
I don't think they actually cared all that much about the decision, you know? Like, to them, they were just deciding who would share a patch of desert in the randomest part of the world. But, you know, again, I don't know if that's actually their perspective or not, but based on the decisions that were made, that kind of feels like that was their perspective.
Well, this was rejected out of hand by the Jewish...
Ben Gurion. Okay, so it was Benjamin something. That is his name. Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad I at least got it sort of right. I don't know if his full name is Benjamin, but it should be, right?
Leader Ben Gurion.
Yeah, I know him. I just couldn't think of his name. I almost called him Wilfrid Laurier. If you know what he sort of looks like Wilfrid Laurier. Obviously, he's not. I was getting my historical figures mixed up.
For many Jews, including refugees from Hitler's Germany, Palestine was the only hope. So increasing numbers tried to get into the country.
Dang, so this is pretty crazy. This is like a refugee boat full of Jewish people fleeing Germany or Europe, I guess. Which even after the defeat of the Nazis, I do understand why Jewish people would have wanted to leave Europe. They definitely got the message loud and clear that they weren't welcome. So I don't blame people for leaving even after the fact. That's the tough part with Israel, is you can't actually blame like the people who left their homes as refugees. You know, you can only blame like just the system in general, I guess.
Even though many would be refused entry when they got there. The British intercepted the ships carrying these illegal immigrants.
Wow, he said illegal immigrants. Even like he said illegal immigrants like he has been watching the news in 2025. That's fantastic. Dang, remember the days when you used to just move thousands of people across the planet in boats like this? Like, that doesn't happen anymore. It's so bizarre to think that, like, an entire country was populated through taking people on boats from places, you know? Like, I know I live in America and that's, like, the whole point of this place, but it's so crazy to see it actually happening on these real boats, you know?
Boatloads were brought ashore and put into detention camps before being sent back to Europe. The British were criticized for what many felt...
Wait, is that true? I guess that is true, isn't it? Like, the Jews were trying to flee Nazi Germany to Israel, and they were turned back anyway. It's just like, I don't know, I feel so bad for the Jews.
felt to be inhumane treatment of desperate...
That's the sad thing, is like, had these people been shown like even a shred of like human dignity, maybe all of this could have been avoided, you know? It's such a shame that, like, I don't know, these people were so abused for so long. Like, that's literally their whole religion, is just them being abused by like the powerful, you know? It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point.
Refugees. So
like when you teach a religion of you guys being the victims. I don't know, I don't want to dive into that too deep, actually.
some Jews decided to take the law into their own...
Oh my God, did those guys just jump on barbed wire? Holy crap. I just don't know what I'm watching
and
anymore.
fight both the Palestinian Arabs and the British. They blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in July 1946.
Isn't it funny that, like, blowing up one hotel was, like, a really bad thing back then? Like, obviously it's really bad now, but, like, I've seen, like, a whole city get blown up on the news and, like, no one even mentions it. So, like, the fact that they're freaking out over the King David Hotel burning down is, like, it's quaint. It's a quaint little issue from the past, I guess.
It was the British military headquarters, and over 100 people were killed and injured.
The British military's headquarters? See, that's also pretty crazy that they just burnt down the British military headquarters. Like, I don't know, like, I've never heard of, like, the American military base being absolutely reduced to rubble ever. I mean, maybe it has happened, but I've just never heard of something like that happening.
Jews and Arabs as well as British. This horrifying incident...
Jesus Christ, oh my gosh, I don't even want to see this. I hope this doesn't get me demonetized either.
...led to more Jewish and Arab violence.
Honestly, this video is probably just going to be flagged for having inappropriate content anyway. I think I'm well past the demonetization mark on this video.
And more detentions. Britain appealed to the United Nations.
Damn, so like they're literally already packing these people into like concentration camps, it looks like.
Who recommended partition, separate Jewish and Arab states. The Jews said yes, the Arabs no.
That's really funny. So the Jews said they wanted their own state. The Arabs obviously did not want the Jews to have their own state. It's just like, it's between a rock and a hard place, really. It's just like nobody in this situation gets to have their way 100%, you know? That's the whole problem with this situation, is that like no one really benefits from it. Maybe the Jews benefit from it, maybe, but like I still think they're in danger too.
Finally, on the 14th of May, 1948...
May 14th, is this like the Independence Day of Israel?
The British gave up their mandate, and the State of Israel was proclaimed by Ben-Gurion, their first Prime Minister.
Shout out Ben-Gurion. So was he reading that in Hebrew? Was there already, or was there still like the established tradition of learning Hebrew? I'm so curious because like, I don't know. It's just, I imagine these people came speaking like European languages, like German or whatever, you know, wherever they came from. So it's interesting if they already knew Hebrew when they arrived. That would be definitely helpful for forming a state, you know, if everyone has their own secret language already.
Britain had been defeated by the problem. Would the new state of Israel do any better?
Britain had been defeated by the problem. Would Israel do any better? You know what? It's, you know, sometimes I think these people knew where history was heading, you know, like based on the statements they say, I feel like they know exactly what's going to happen. This is crazy though. This is like the early footage of like independent Israel. You know, like we don't have footage of like American Independence Day, but they literally have straight up footage from the day they gained independence. That's just like, that's wild.
1 year later, Israel was to become a member of the United Nations.
Formally declare Israel admitted to membership in the United Nations.
But this was only after Israel had survived a violent attack by Arab states who believed Israel had no right to exist.
See, again, this is just like a moment in history that, like, if it went even a little differently, like, we might not even have this problem today. You know, I hate to say it, but, like, if these countries had succeeded in, like, abolishing Israel from the Middle East, like, I just don't know where the Middle East would be today. Like, this is just a completely different path that we just never took.
In May 1948,
Not that it would be better or worse, I'm really not trying to play sides on this whole conflict. I'm just trying to learn the most I can. But it's so interesting to think that, like, they could have just dealt with Israel on, like, day one and never had this problem. It's so wild.
in May 1948, Syria, Egypt, and Transjordan.
Syria, Egypt, and Transjordan attacked Israel. Interesting. I feel like I already knew that, but wasn't that in the 60s, I thought? I didn't think that was just, like, immediately after. There's probably another conflict, probably like the 6 Days War or something. Or maybe that's what this is, I don't know.
Attacked Israel from the north, the south, and the east.
Dang, how embarrassing would it be if you and all your buds tried to gang up on this new country and they whooped your ass, though?
But the Israelis...
Yeah, when your enemy has planes and you don't.
But the Israelis fought back and managed to defeat the Arab forces.
See, this is some nuts footage, too. This is actual war footage from, like, the Israeli War of 1948.
Fearful of Israeli...
Like, this is what Palestine looked like before Israel, too. Like, that's also what's being preserved here, is, like, the pre-Israeli Palestine, or at least, like, partially. I mean, obviously, this was filmed after the formation of Israel, but I think this footage that we're watching is actually, like, contemporaneous with the founding of Israel. It's interesting, no matter what, to see what this place looked like once upon a time.
reprisals, thousands of Palestinian Arabs fled from Israeli territory. They settled in camps just over the borders. Many expected they'd only be there for a short time.
See, this is crazy. Yeah, the beginning of the Palestine refugee crisis is already people are fleeing to Jordan and across the borders, thinking that they're going to be allowed back in at some point.
But they were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the narrator spoiled it, but yeah, they were wrong. It's so crazy that, like, this exact process is still happening. Like, they're pretty much identical justification, identical, like, people that it's taking place against, like, it's still happening. Like, this same exact thing is happening to this day. And honestly, even worse.
With the war over, Israel had won her claim to exist. Now there were no limits.
That does suck, though, like, when you declare a war to destroy them, but, like, because they won, now they have, like, that to say. Like, they have cemented their status as a country because they fought a war against all of their enemies and won, like, again, like, it cemented Israel in history at this point because they won.
To Jewish immigration. People were needed to build up the country.
Dang, look at these freaking thick Israeli women. Like, these are some farm girls for sure. Like, no wonder they had such a good time at the beginning of founding of Israel. These are some working women right here. Freaking John Deere tractors, too. That is the forgotten aspect of this all. I guess I won't say it's forgotten. That's part of the propaganda, again, is that you're not being told that, like, all this modern technology was being shared with Israelis and not the other Middle Easterners. Like, all this John Deere gasoline-powered tractors and all this. So all the planes, the military planes that they used to win that war with, like, those weren't Israeli originals. Those were, borrowed from other military powers like the U.S. Again, people are definitely aware of that. It's just like, I don't know. I guess in this program, they're not addressing that, which, again, that's part of the propaganda. Like, when you think of Israel as a new nation and you see all this, you think, wow, like, Israel was so, like, industrial and they were so, like, strong and, like, rich already. But you realize, like, that was a falsehood. That was a creation of the, like, Allied powers in the response to World War II, really, is to create a modern Israeli state. Like, they didn't show up to the Holy Land with a furnace for smelting iron, like, they were, I don't know if they were given it, but there was definitely a significant amount of foreign investment in Israel from the very beginning that allowed it to function as a, like, highly modernized society that was not given to any of the surrounding Arab states, which I understand why they weren't given to the Arabs. It's just like Israel always had this very particular advantage over its neighbors.
All the new states' borders were with Arab countries, of which the most powerful...
This is such a funny little map, though. Like, these lines aren't perfectly right, but they're at least close enough. And they have this little, like, piece of Israel in the Golan Heights, even. I'm already so curious about this map.
Of which the most powerful was Egypt, immediately to the west. This country had been ruled since 1936 by King Farouk.
Dang, King Farouk. I didn't really realize that either, but like, yeah, I guess Israel was under, or not Israel, Egypt was under the rule of a king during the foundation of Israel. That's just, again, like that's just part of the context that I feel like has been lost.
First, he'd been popular, but the corruption of his governments and his way of life lost him general support. So on the 23rd of July, 1952, the army revolted against the king.
Again, this is like an unthinkable act, like the army rebelling against like the ruler of a country. I just feel like obviously that's happened plenty of times in history. It's so bizarre to think of this happening, I don't know, in this sort of context.
Expelled him, did away with the old political parties, and set up a republic under General Naguib. But the real power lay with Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser. He soon replaced Naguib as president, and by 1954 he was the unchallenged leader of Egypt, determined...
Nasser, like Lake Nasser. So this is the guy who built the Aswan High Dam. So this is like a very notable figure in Egyptian history, or at least modern Egyptian history. Maybe not as notable as like the pharaohs, but he is definitely like the architect of the modern Egyptian state.
To make it powerful and independent.
It's a shame we can barely see him in this image, but yeah, Nasser is definitely an Egyptian name to remember.
Much of the country was poor and backward. Most Egyptians...
Remember when you could just say that about a whole country? Like, most of this country is just poor and backwards. Like, what an insult, you know? What a true insult that they're just backwards. Like, that's such an offensive thing to say about, like, any large group of people. But people just used to call entire countries backwards back then, you know? It's really savage, honestly.
Egyptians did not own the land they farmed.
See, that's also important to understand, is that most of these Egyptians were just poor peasants who did not own their land. It's essentially feudalism still, you know? It's hard to understand that, like, while the Israelis were trying to establish, like, a westernized democracy, their neighbors were literal, like, feudal lords, you know? It's like... I don't know. Maybe I'm drinking the propaganda too much on this one. Maybe, I don't know. I shouldn't say any more, actually. You're right.
Nasser took over the rich landowners' properties and gave them to the peasants.
Okay, so that is like a little bit of collectivism or something, right? I guess Nasser, I don't really know that much about Nasser to know that he was a collectivist or not, but it's interesting to see that, like, yeah, Egypt was revolutionizing its land ownership at this time too. Which honestly, what's the difference between giving all this land away to your peasants and Israelis kind of doing the same thing but for other peasants? I don't know. Again, I'm drinking the propaganda too much on this one. I'm starting to side with Israel, so let's just keep going. I promise I'm really not trying to do that. It's the propaganda that's doing it to me.
This made him immensely popular. Many homes were primitive and overcrowded. Nasser rehoused thousands of Egyptians in modern blocks of flats.
See, this is making me respect Nasser a lot too, like the fact that he built all these apartments. I wonder if this was like a legitimate, like, I don't know, economic boon for Israel, like, or not for Israel, for Egypt. I wonder if this is like, I don't know, like Egyptians saw this and were like, wow, Nasser is like the best guy ever because he built us these boring apartment buildings. I wonder what this part of Egypt looks like now, too. It definitely is not this open. I bet there's roads and, like, all sorts of crap everywhere now. It's just, I don't know. I'm so curious about these neighborhoods. Like, are these, like, peasant neighborhoods, or are these, like, the rich, like, nobilities, like, apartment blocks? I'm curious.
He took over a country where many had no proper medical care. So
Dude, schizomyosis in Egypt, right? Schizomyosis. I already watched that. Schizomyosis. If he mentions schizomyosis, that's double points for everyone.
Clinics and hospitals were set up in many parts of Egypt. Much of Egypt's economy depended on an adequate and regular supply of water. But this was not...
Yeah, it's pretty accurate to describe Egypt's economy at this point as almost entirely agricultural. I mean, again, I don't know a perfect assessment of Egypt's economy, but, like, they didn't have, like, industries or anything the same way that, like, European countries did at this time. So it's just interesting. It's like you kind of assume that countries did have, like, their industrial bases already. But it's like, no, like most of the Egyptians were just peasant farmers at this point. Most still are, I imagine. Not peasants, but like most are probably still farmers.
Always available or reliable. So one of Nasser's most cherished projects was the giant Aswan Dam.
Yeah, I called it the Aswan Dam. I wonder if they're going to talk about Abu Simbel, the huge, like, Ramses II sculpture in the mountain that they had to move because they flooded this plain.
Designed to irrigate large areas of Egypt and provide hydroelectric power.
Yeah, this must have been like an absolutely revolutionary thing to happen in Egypt. I wonder how much of Egypt's electricity is produced by this dam. I wonder if it's like still like a very high percent or if it's not very much at all.
Nasser also wished to build up his military strength.
Colonel Nasser to visit Czechoslovakia. See, what an old headline for a paper. You know, again, like that's a Czechoslovakia even, you know, like you couldn't have asked for a better way to date this paper than Nasser to visit Czechoslovakia. Western domination ended by arms purchases. So I wonder what that means too. Hang on, can I read this paper real quick? The Egyptian Prime Minister, Colonel Nasser, has accepted an invitation from the Czechoslovak government to visit Prague. This is announced by the Prague radio yesterday in a talk on the present, blah, blah, blah. All right, now the other side. Document which showed the extent of British and American military aid to Israel. This included 2 British Meteor jet aircraft. So that's so funny. That's what I was talking about. The aircraft did not come from Israel. They were given to them by the colonial overlords. Okay, that's so funny. I did not expect for this paper to explain that for us at all. But yes, 20 Mosquito fighters, 7 transport of aircraft, 100 American Sherman tanks, 15 Churchill tanks, 100 armored cars, and 70 field guns. So yeah, this pretty much outlines exactly how Israel managed to defeat its neighbors, its 3 neighbors in an all-out war at the very first year of its existence, is because they had military help.
When the West refused to give him what he wanted, he got weapons and planes from the Czechs.
That's so funny how the Czechs were like a balance to the Allied powers. Like nobody nowadays would ever think of Czechoslovakia as being this like counterweight to the Western Allied powers. Like if you don't get weapons from the British, you can buy them from Czechoslovakia of all people. You know, today I think of Czechoslovakia, or I think of Czechia and Slovakia as being very peaceful, like benign countries. So it's so funny that back then, like that was the military contract that they got.
He denied Soviet influence.
Oh, another paper. Can we read this one too? Or is it the same? Oh, this is another paper. Do you guys mind if I read these papers or no? I think there's even so much interesting information stored in these that I think it's worth it. Colonel Nasser's pledge on arms deal. No open door for communist influence. Was Czechoslovakia communist? I think it was, right? It was beyond the Iron Curtain, so I think it was. So I guess that's an interesting intrigue for this whole Czechoslovakian arms deal. Let's read this, though. Colonel Nasser, the Prime Minister, tonight gave an assurance that the agreement with Czechoslovakia for the supply of arms for the Egyptian forces would not open the door for wider communist influence in Egypt. That is interesting. So they were worried that Czechoslovakia selling their arms to the Egyptians was going to turn the country communist. It's just such a funny web of allegiances, you know, like communism. How does that even play into this? You know, it's so complex, the history back then. Like that's what makes watching this sort of stuff so interesting, is you forget that like the Czechoslovakians were selling arms and we were worried about communism at the same time. It's so interesting. That's why I'm bothering to read all this. All right, the next page, liked British weapons, but the West had bullied Egypt. The West had bullied Egypt. The Americans were at first prevented from selling arms to her by British influence. That's funny how the British told us not to sell guns to the Egyptians. That's really funny, honestly. Later, they insisted that membership of a mutual security pact was a prerequisite for the supply of arms. That's a fair point, I guess. I tried 3 years, he said. I stressed that two parts of my policy were defense against outside aggression and security So, all right, that's interesting. It's just like, I guess you don't really realize how complex the exchange of arms were, especially in the aftermath of World War II. And the weird way that communism played into all of this as well.
But Britain and America now refused money for Aswan. So the Suez Canal, owned by the British, was nationalized by Nasser in July 1956.
Oh, so was that it? So the British weren't letting them do stuff, so the Egyptians nationalized the Suez Canal? That's interesting. Again, like, it's context to like this that I feel like you just don't get from like any textbook or anything. It's just like all this information has been so perfectly preserved in these programs. That's why we're here. That's why we're watching this.
To give him the money he needed. This was to lead in October to the confrontation between...
October 29th, 1956. Is this the Six-Day War? I think this is. Or is this the October War? Or it was the same thing? I don't know. Oh, we're going to learn.
Between Egypt, Britain and France, known in the West as the Suez Crisis, and by the Arabs as the tripartite aggression of Britain, France and Israel.
The tri-apartheid aggression? That's a really funny way of putting it. I kind of like that.
Under a secret agreement.
Dude, look how fast that tank is going. Holy gosh. Oh my god. Like that. That's so crazy. I did not expect that tank to be going like 70 miles an hour.
Agreement with the French, who'd also involved the British, Israelis, in retaliation for many irregular attacks launched from Egypt, struck through Egypt's Sinai to reach the canal.
Okay, so yeah, this is when Israel took the Sinai Peninsula. Interesting. Again, I've heard of this historical event happening. I don't have the perfect mental context for it all, but I know it happened.
They were highly successful, capturing many Egyptian prisoners.
Again, how embarrassing for the Egyptians. Like, I know you don't have a modernized state comparable to Israel at this point, but like, just to declare war and get like absolutely bodied like this, like, I bet they're still licking their wounds a little.
The British and French called for both sides to withdraw from the canal itself, which would have allowed the Israelis to stay in Sinai. When the Egyptians refused, Britain and France sent in their bombers and troops to force them out.
Dude, what a tight formation those planes were just in. I know this is not the point of the video, but I'm just like, I'm in awe at the show of power that I'm being shown right now. Like, dang, they were just bombing the Egyptians' fields, too. That's what it looks like. These just look like agricultural fields. Maybe they were bombing, like, roads or something, but it doesn't look like that. Again, back before, like, every state had, like, an air force, you could kind of just do whatever you wanted, too.
But to ensure success, the British and French needed United States support.
That's so funny. I'm going to... Somebody save that sound clip. But to ensure success, the British needed the U.S. support. Like, yeah, you did.
This the Americans were not prepared to give, as their president explained.
The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions. Nor were...
Do we believe that, though? Do we believe that the United States did not actually have a say in, like, any of this conflict? I guess I don't know. It's propaganda, so it's trying to make me believe that, you know? But it's like, I don't know. I don't know if the British really would have told the Americans about their invasion of, like, the Egyptians.
We informed of them in advance.
Is Dwight Eisenhower here? Is he lying, or is he actually being honest? That's the real question.
We believe these actions to have been taken in error, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Yeah, can we play that little sound back again? We don't believe in violence to settle international disputes. Yeah. This is kind of like the era of using violence to settle international disputes, though.
We believe these actions to have been taken in error.
These actions to have been taken in error.
For we do not accept the use of force.
We do not accept the use of force
as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Yeah, for the settlement of international disputes. What's crazy is these images of like these Egyptian home beings destroyed. This looks exactly like the footage out of Gaza today. You know, like it really is no different.
Without this support, the Suez operation was doomed to failure. Although the British Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, tried to put a brave...
Anthony Eden? I feel like I've never heard that name before. That's like a historical figure. A little like achievement unlocked historical figure mentioned, Anthony Eden. What an ironic last name for this guy to have.
Face on it.
We make no apology and will never make one
for the action which we and our French allies took together.
That is an old British man speaking too. Like, some things don't change, I guess.
In November,
dude, look at these little, the little UN armored vehicles. This is so funny. It's like, I guess they still have armored vehicles like this today, but this UN lettering literally looks like it was painted on by hand.
United Nations troops took up their positions along the canal, replacing the British and French, who withdrew a few weeks later.
So dang, that was the UN flag flying. So this is probably like a very, I wonder like how, I don't know, not televised, how like reported on this whole issue was. It must have been like the issue of the time for sure, like especially with the Suez Canal involved. It's so insane to imagine this sort of action taking place in this part of the world right here. It's just, I don't know, it's hard to even understand this history sometimes. It's hard to like put yourself in it and to understand it from the person who actually lived through it, which is, again, the purpose of these sort of old videos. The reason I watch all this is to actually try to understand these things from the perspective of the times. It's so hard to do when there's so much context. There's so much chronological context that you just don't have from looking at this from 100 years in the future.
Even the Israelis, who were much less ready to give up their territorial gains, were, in the end, persuaded to withdraw.
Honestly, see, that's another crazy thing, that the Israelis completely conquered the Sinai Peninsula, probably like twice the size of their actual country, and then they just left it and gave it back to Egypt. You know, like, I don't know. I feel like this is the propaganda talking, but like, that's pretty nice of Israel. I don't know, like Israel could have just kept it, I feel like. And they, honestly, if I was Israeli, I would have wanted to keep it. That's all I gotta say. Again, this is propaganda though. I'm drinking it. We're all drinking it together right now. Like I'm not siding with Israel. I'm trying to understand it better.
For the Egyptians, the Suez affair made Nasser a national hero. To many out-
Did it? It really made Nasser a hero? That's so, I would have expected the exact opposite. If I declared war on Israel and they took over our entire Sinai Peninsula up until the Suez Canal, maybe I'm missing more context, but I don't feel like Nasser really came away from this conflict a winner. But maybe I'm wrong.
Outside Egypt, he became a symbol of resistance to Western colonialism and imperialism.
I guess he did stand up to the British, and that's what matters, but I don't know if he won when he stood up against the British. I mean, I guess they did get their peninsula back. It's just like, I wouldn't have been too proud of this whole thing if I were in power.
He set up the UAR.
The UAR, oh my gosh. I've mentioned this in videos before too. The United Arab Republics with him and Syria, or with Egypt and Syria.
The United Arab Republic.
A very, very short-lived political union between some of the Arab states. It's interesting though, because I've learned about the United Arab Republic before, but I never really thought about it in the context of countering Israel. That's the interesting context that is being added through this.
In 1958. The UAR joined Egypt and Syria together.
Yeah, Egypt and Syria for some reason. Like, what a random, I mean, it's not random, but it's like they're not even physically connected. It's just, I don't think the UAR was ever meant to succeed.
But Egypt was by far the stronger partner.
Yeah, honestly, it might have just been like a colonial aspiration of Egypt, honestly, to like control all of Syria as well.
Nasser believed in the unity of all Arab countries, but with Egypt to lead them.
See, that's so funny, because that is like the problem with Pan-Arabism and Pan-Africanism, like any Pan ideology is like everyone who believes it wants themselves to be at the head of controlling their entire group. Nobody is all right with saying, yes, we should all be one entity and you other person should rule it, not me. You know, it's just like, that's the one piece that's missing from Pan-Arabism.
He persuaded Russia to provide the money for the Aswan Dam.
Dang, really? I didn't know that. I didn't know Russia paid for the Aswan Dam. I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's just, again, it's this historical context that you just lose after a while.
He seemed to be going from success to success.
Dang, again, crazy that we have actual footage of the construction of the Aswan High Dam. It's just like, this is why you watch this sort of stuff, is because this is actually history in motion.
Soviet influence in Egypt grew.
That's so funny. I completely just like did not think about that at all. Again, like communism just rearing its head in like the weirdest of places. I don't know. I guess I'm learning a lot. Again, this is just like the lost context of it all. Like I did not think that like during the Suez Crisis that there was also like the huge Soviet influence. It's such a complex international politics clusterfuck, really.
Their technicians and money helped to realize Nasser's dreams of a
I think I can say that because this video is probably already demonetized.
modern, industrialized Egypt, more than ever well-suited
Dang, this is a crazy freaking operation, though, right
to
here.
lead the Arab world. But in spite of all appearances, Nasser's prestige in the Arab world was beginning to decline. Many Arab countries were jealous of his claims to be their leader and spokesman.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty foolish way to get everyone on your side, is to call yourself the leader already. Was that actually his, like, method, or is he just, like, falling victim to his own, like, human behavior? No? Did he think he was going to accomplish Pan-Arabism by saying that Egypt should be at the head of it, or was it just naivety? Was he just not smart enough to realize that no one would want to go along with making him the king of Arabia?
Egypt was spending more and more on weapons of all...
Dude, again, another good shot, another good stock footage shot of those old flags. I mentioned that earlier, but like, I've spent so much time combing through these exact sorts of programs looking for old flag footage specifically, and there it is, just a good old United Arab Republic flag in its natural habitat. You don't get that very often, so I always like paying attention to the flags that are being flown, because that is like footage. That's the whole reason I started this channel, is because I had to go diving through all this sorts of old footage to find footage of flags like this for my videos. So now that whenever I see it, I'm just like, oh, the flag,
Egypt was spending more and more on weapons of all kinds, mostly from the Soviet Union. Nasser decided that these should be used to deter any future Israeli attack.
See, again, so funny, like, to deter an Israeli attack. Like, aren't you the guys that attacked them? Maybe I'm drinking the propaganda again. It feels like the Egyptians were the aggressors. But I guess now that they had a new neighbor who did have a modernized military, I guess there was a reason for Egypt to also invest. It's just like, it seems like such a waste of money. Like, everyone's spending so much on new machines of war when they could have been benefited so much more by buying, like, tractors and stuff. I don't know. It seems like a militarization that, like, just did not help the country. Again, another great shot of flags, though. These helicopters flying the flags from below, this is like an amazing flag shot. Again, I wish there was color so that you could see the red and the black and the green stars. I think that's what the flag is. The red on top, the green stars, and the black on bottom. That's like, and the two stars. The two stars is Egypt and Syria. That's like the whole thing, too. It's like the United Arab Republic. It's just very interesting.
He was also increasingly forced to demonstrate his hostility to Israel in an attempt to heal some of his conflicts with other Arab leaders. He began to
See, that's pretty bizarre, too, that you had to, like, prove your street worthiness on the Arab streets by, like, showing your hostility towards Israel. Again, this is help pointing me towards feeling bad for Israel. That's the propaganda talking, but we have to be aware that this is trying to make me feel sorry for Israel, I guess.
prepare for the eventuality of war.
And you know what? It's kind of working. Again, I'm smart enough to know that this is just propaganda, but it's starting to work its magic on me. I'm starting to drink it.
He was also increasingly forced to demonstrate his hostility to Israel in an attempt to heal some of his conflicts with other Arab leaders.
It's just so funny to think that, like, an Arab leader would have changed their mind on him based on how he treated the Israelis, even poorly. Like, again, a very strange set of relationships here in this part of the world that I, as an American, am just, like, completely, I don't know, left out of.
He began to prepare for the eventuality of war.
He began to prepare for the eventuality of war. Interesting.
In May 1967, amid growing...
May 1967. Man, does all of Israeli history just happen in May or something? Is that the first, like, nice season of the year in Israel or something?
Tension, he ordered the United Nations, who'd been there since 1956, out of Egypt.
Oh, so they're kicking the UN out of Egypt. All right, the UN peacekeepers. Interesting.
The Egyptians then began to build up their forces in Sinai.
It must have been so clear to see to everyone that they were trying to invade them again, like if that was really the case. What's crazy is to think that, like, if Egypt had succeeded in, like, eliminating Israel, like, they probably would have been able to, like, unite the Arab states and maybe would have been, like, at the head of it. It's just, again, another, like, crazy world possibility that, like, could have happened with only a few things happening differently.
Meanwhile, the Israelis had been building up their armed forces too. They were largely supplied.
Yeah, again, I can't really blame Israel for, like, really investing in their military when they knew they were surrounded on all sides by, you know, aggressive or hostile neighbors. Again, like, I'm not justifying Israel's actions or their military. I'm just saying, like, from their perspective, I guess it does make sense. Again, that's the propaganda, though. I'm drinking it. We're drinking it, all right?
From the West, particularly France. Their army was well trained, tough, and confident. Throughout May, the tension mounted. To the Israelis, it seemed that the Arab attack might come at any time.
That was a good little shot of the barbed wire and the woods or the hills. That's just, I don't know. I don't really care about the photography in this program, but like that was a good shot. The old promised land with barbed wire in front of it, that's a good artistic shot.
Might come at any time. Then at the end of May, King Hussein of Jordan came to Cairo to sign a defense agreement with Egypt.
King Hussein of Jordan. Interesting. Again, another like monarch. Again, you forget that. You forget that at the same time Israel was establishing itself, all these surrounding countries were just like monarchies, you know, like not to say any worse or better, but it's just like, it's just a gray area, I guess.
He was the last link in the Arab chain around Israel.
June 1967. All right, I think this is the time of conflict, the 6 Days War.
On June the 5th, the Israelis attacked. They sent their tanks in against Egypt, Syria.
Is that real? The Israelis struck first in this conflict? That's interesting. Again, you know, I don't know if that's a pointed fact that they included or if that's just the factual assessment of the situation.
And Jordan.
Again, you know, it's like if you witness your neighbors building up a military on your borders, you pretty much know what they're going to do with that military. Again, it's like how much of this is self-defense versus like how you don't even need to be here to begin with. But again, I guess they did. That's the difficult part of this whole situation, I guess.
Israeli planes struck the Egyptian Air Force on the ground.
Again, crazy that we have footage from Egyptian or Israeli planes fighting in this war. Like, again, just so wild that we have footage of that.
The Israelis swept through Sinai, driving the Egyptians back over the Suez Canal.
Wait, so this is the second time the Israelis took over the Sinai Peninsula? At that point, I would have kept it.
It was a total disaster for the Egyptians. They lost over 10,000 men, 700 tanks, hundreds of guns, and nearly all their warplanes. And it was all over in 6 days.
Okay, it was the 6 Days War. That's what I thought.
The Israelis captured the Arab-held old city of Jerusalem. General Moshe...
See, this is also, I feel like, a important moment in Israeli history, because I feel like you don't really understand that Israelis didn't have control over Jerusalem. Like, I don't know. It's, again, that's like historical context. Like, they controlled Israel, but Jerusalem was divided into, like, the neighborhoods and whatever, and I think, like, half of that fell into Palestine, and then they had to conquer it. Just something else that you don't quite fully understand unless you actually are in this time in history.
Moshe Dayan, the Israeli commander, came to see one of the most sacred Jewish monuments, the famous Wailing Wall. For the Israelis, it was a fitting climax to their triumph.
It is just cool to see this. Oh, didn't they like move a ladder on it or something? Or is that another wall? Like, aren't you not allowed to change this at all? That might be somewhere else in Israel. I'm wondering if there is like something like that. Like if anyone who knows this religious site well enough can like see the interesting aspects of it. Like, are there plants growing out of this wall? I feel like I've seen in modern times there are like no plants coming out of this wall. So it would be interesting if like there actually were just like weeds growing out of it when the Israelis arrived. That's what it looks like. It looks like there are just weeds growing out of this wall. I wonder if that's still the case. I don't think so. I feel like I've seen that wall and it's like pretty clean. It's funny how there's just one wall in Israel that I know about, you know, like a wall.
But for the Palestinian Arabs, it was another story. Once again, as in 1948, thousands of refugees escaped across the River Jordan. Altogether, 400,000 fled from the territories occupied by Israel after the Six-Day War.
This is what's so crazy, too, is seeing these refugee camps. Like, first off, these tents look like they were prepared for this. Like, these don't look like hobbled together. These looks like these families already had their tents all set up. Maybe that's like part of the, I don't know, Bedouin lifestyle or something, but it's so fascinating to see this sort of problem all the way back then and how it was dealt with. Again, 400,000 people had to flee during this time.
They joined the other...
I wish we could hear the numbers a bit better. Like how many, what percent of the total number of Palestinians was that? Like, was that like half of them, or was that like, you know, a very small amount? I don't know. Not that it really changes anything. It's just, I'm curious, like, how many people were actually being forced out relative to the number of the people in the country itself.
Refugees in overcrowded camps, relying on rations largely provided through the United Nations. Some would remain there for a long time. After her victories in the 1967 war, Israel extended her borders.
You know what I just noticed? That this program technically is in color, because we're looking at a blue Israel. Just all the footage is actually just in black and white, though. That's we're watching a color program that's in black and white. I don't know.
She now occupied Arab land in the north, east, and the south, where Sinai was...
Oh, look at this, northeast and the south. So there's the Sinai Peninsula that they're occupying, as well as the Gaza Strip. Then there's the West Bank, and then there's the Golan Heights, even in Syria. Again, pretty accurate, pretty good map. I'm going to say that this doesn't feel like that bad of propaganda yet. Maybe it is though, I don't know.
The biggest conquest. The Golan Heights.
The Golan Heights, whatever. I had a teacher whose last name was Golan, and she went to Israel all the time, so I think she had a relation to it, and she pronounced her last name Golan, so I don't know. That's why I say it like that, at least.
We're now under Israeli control. Previously...
My AP American history teacher's last name was Golan, and she had an Israeli husband, and she went to Israel all the time. So, you know, it's funny to think that I probably learned American history from, like, an Israeli sympathizer at the very least, or if not, somebody who was Israeli. I don't know.
Yeah,
just what a lens to have learned American history through.
Syria had been able to threaten Israeli farm settlements.
Dang, look at this. Oh, man, look at these people's clothes. Her little bra, that's funny. It's hard to demonize these, like, settlers or these colonists because they are just, like, modern people at the same time. Like, look at this guy's John Deere tractor. I don't know if that's actually a John Deere, but that's a tractor for sure. John Deeres are usually green. I don't want to... it could be a red John Deere. I don't want to say that, actually.
But
it might be a Soviet tractor, too. That might be the green versus red tractor debate.
Threat to Israel now developed.
Dude, look at this. This is Jordan? Holy moly. Is this a refugee camp, or is this just like a city?
It came from among the Palestinian refugees in camps like these.
Yeah, this is a refugee camp. This is nuts. See, again, a refugee camp all the way back in like the 70s or whenever this was made. Again, looks pretty much identical to what we see in this region today.
Many had been living in the Arab countries bordering Israel for nearly 20 years. These countries didn't try to absorb the Palestinians on the grounds that it would make it difficult for them to claim that their real homes were in Israel.
Yeah, see, this is like maybe the most frustrating aspect of this all is that like all these Arab people, maybe not the most frustrating part, but this is definitely from an outsider's perspective, like a curious aspect of this all is that like none of the other Arab states wanted to help the Palestinians move. Like they all wanted to force them to stay in Palestine so that the Palestinian freedom movement or the Palestinian state movement would have its proper, population or whatever. I feel like so much more suffering was created because these people wanted the Palestinians to fight for their cause rather than welcoming them into their own countries. It's this weird paradox where they're rooting for the Palestinians, but they're not willing to actually help them leave. It's just, again, I bet from an Arab perspective, this all makes a lot more sense, but from the outside perspective, when I'm literally guzzling all this propaganda, it doesn't really, it seems just like, it seems heartless. It seems like if these people really thought of the Palestinians as their like Arab brothers, for them to have like denied them access into their countries and were like, no, continue suffering in Palestine until you achieve independence. It seems a little messed up. I don't know. Again, I'm all for the Palestinian movement. It's just like, I just feel like it caused more suffering than it ever needed to.
For nearly 20 years, the Palestinians relied on the Arab governments to help them return.
I don't want to say I'm pro-Palestinian either. I am pro-human rights. I am pro-peace and everything. I'm not pro-Palestine. I'm not pro-Israel. I am perfectly unbiased in this watching. Please, like that's what I'm trying to be at least.
Return to their homes and support them in...
Oh, well, let's read what this says. We fight Israel because it occupies our land. Well, you know what? That's pretty much like the best explanation you could ever give of the conflict that's in this place right now or back then. Like, that's it. That's the reason. That's the whole conflict right there. And that's also why this conflict can't be solved, is because in order for them to get their land back, Israel needs to be dissolved. And it's like, that's never going to happen. So I don't know. This statement alone illustrates the complexity of the argument so well. We fight Israel because it occupies our land. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward reasoning there.
Then they decided to take the matter into their own hands, led by men like Yasser Arafat.
Yasser Arafat. I've learned about this guy a little in recent times, but I'm curious to see what we learn about him through this lens.
Who believed Palestinians had to fight to gain recognition.
Jesus Christ, is this guy just shooting at these guys training for the military? Holy crap. That's some serious military training. This guy's just firing at will at these guys. That's nuts. What the heck? Oh my God.
In the camps around Israel, groups were trained to carry the fight into that country.
That's actually nuts. I have no other language to even describe that. Like, imagine just crawling under barbed wire and someone with an actual live gun is shooting bullets at you. Oh my gosh. And that's training, you know?
Regarded by many as terrorists, they thought of themselves as freedom fighters.
That's still the argument that's waging to this day. Are the people fighting for Palestinian freedoms freedom fighters or are they terrorists? Again, it depends on your perspective. And again, this did a pretty good job of saying that there are two sides to that. Like, some people do consider them purely terrorists, and then others do consider them freedom fighters, just like, American revolutionaries. It's just, I'm glad that it at least illustrated that there are two sides to this argument. Again, maybe I'm just drinking this propaganda right up, but it seems like it's doing a fair job.
Even their children who'd never seen Palestine were trained to fight Israel.
Dang, you can see the effect of that gun shooting on these kids all the way at the back. Like, it is really scary. I would be I don't blame any of these kids for being frightened either. You can look at these kids as this child is shooting a gun with all these other kids marching. It's just like, I don't know. This is a little disturbing. Literal, like, child soldiers in training right here too. Like, that little kid at the back was so scared.
The 1970s.
And what's crazy is these kids are wearing like perfectly westernized clothing too. They're not in like, typical traditional Arab garb. It's just like pants, jeans, sweaters, and that sort of stuff.
70s were the years of the terrorists. at Dawson's Field in Jordan to gain international recognition.
Oh, don't these planes blow up? Is that what's about to happen? I think they do, right? It's like going to be like a big explosion, isn't it?
For their cause, Palestinians hijacked Western airliners and demanded the release of Palestinian...
Oh no, they just hijacked the planes. Oh, I think I remember hearing about this too. I think the planes do blow up though, don't they? I don't know, we'll have to watch. Don't they blow up like with all the hostages in it, or am I spoiling it, or am I just making that up?
And prisoners. They were prepared to threaten the whole world.
We will treat them in the same way their governments treat our own prisoners.
See, that argument that the Palestinians are just treating the Israelis as equally horrible as the Israelis had treated them. It's like, I get that argument. I definitely get it. It's such a shame that ends up making them look so much more savage than the Israelis, even though the truth is like the exact opposite, that honestly the Palestinians have never gotten them back for the horrors that the Israelis have done.
The PFLP warns that any...
Again, crazy that this guy also just speaks English, like a look into the past of how Palestinian people used to actually engage in international diplomacy, and part of that was having people who spoke English, and now there's not really so much of that. I mean, I bet they still have like translators and stuff, but for the person who's actually leading the charge to be an English speaker, even secondary language, like it tells you a lot about what these people used to be about, Like they used to be an educated, organized force of people for their own protection. Whether they still are is up for debate, but at least at this time they had generals who had like Western educations and stuff. I guess that's still probably true though.
Stupid intervention to free the hostages will only endanger their lives. The medical team of PFLP...
If their demands were not met, they acted ruthlessly.
Oh, see, I did know that the plane blew up. All right, I'm so glad that actually... Oh, I'm not glad that happened, but I'm proud of myself for knowing that was going to happen. Jesus, was that full of people too, or was that like an empty one?
In fact,
And they don't even explain like the whole significance of that terrorist attack. But that also must have been like a very notable news event. Like I bet people do remember hearing about that in the news, even all the way now. Like that feels like an on par with like a 9/11 of sorts.
their actions became so violent that in Amman, in Jordan, where the Palestinians outnumbered the Jordanians and appeared to be challenging the government, the army attacked and...
See, this is also another crazy chapter of this whole story that I feel like nobody actually knows, is that like the Palestinians tried to destabilize Jordan in order to take over that country so that they could use those resources in order to take back their homeland. It's just, and then you have the Jordanians fighting against the Palestinians because they want them to actually go back to their home too. It's so complicated and it's so, yeah, it's messed up. That's all I'm going to say, guys.
Drove them out of the country after some bitter fighting.
And again, all of this just led to even more suffering on behalf of the Palestinians. It's just like, I wonder how many refugees were kicked out of Jordan because of this sort of conflict, who had nothing to do with it either.
But the terrorist attacks continued.
Dang, what is this headline? So, report massacre hired Japs kill 26 in Arab vengeance. Is that real? They hired Japanese people to kill Arabs? That's, again, this is why I find reading these headlines so interesting. Hired Japs kill 26 in Arab vengeance. Like, what a bizarre news headline. I don't know.
On Israel.
I never would have guessed something like that. That's another aspect of the historical context that has just been completely lost if you don't watch something like this.
Particularly on Israel. In May 1972, an attack on Lod Airport at Tel Aviv resulted in
Lod Airport, I feel like this is another notable terrorist attack that I've actually heard about before.
Nearly 100 killed and wounded. Then, in September, 11 Israeli athletes were murdered at the Munich Olympics.
Oh man, I've definitely heard of the Munich Olympics though. I didn't realize these athletes were killed though. I thought they were just taken hostage. That is
games.
Again, it's also brutal what Israel did to the Palestinians. It's just, I'm being shown one or the other. That's the propaganda again, is we're being shown all the bad deeds that the Palestinians did in reaction to the Israeli actions that we are not being shown. We are not being shown Palestinians being forced out of their homes, right? We are not watching the Palestinians having their fields burned down so that Israelis could plant their own olives. It's like we're not seeing any of the actual abuse from the Israeli side. So all of these actions from the Palestinian side seem like over the top when I just don't know. I don't want to call these terrorist attacks not over the top. They definitely are, but it's just like without the context of how the Palestinians were suffering, you can't understand their actions towards the Israelis. And it's just like, it's this game of telephone where you never really know who started the conflict because no one is just going to tell you how badly the Palestinians had it. And I think that's the true evil, the true bad aspect of this propaganda is it really is just glazing over the fact that these Palestinians were abused and oppressed so thoroughly. That's the forgotten aspect of all this context that I don't think is being added in, which I feel like is the most important part of informing your opinion on why these Palestinians took these actions. I'm starting to feel the propaganda a little.
The Israeli response was always swift and ruthless.
Well, you know what? Some things haven't changed, I guess. Israel has not changed that part of their response even one bit. Like, they are still swift and equally as ruthless as they've ever been.
Places suspected of harboring terrorists were immediately destroyed.
Again, this literally looks like Gaza right now.
But in places like the
Gaza Strip. Oh, okay, now we're going to actually see what Gaza looks like.
Gaza Strip, many Palestinian Arabs continued to live under Israeli control.
Again, this is just wild that we're seeing like the very beginning of like the Gaza concentration camp that it is. Like we're seeing like the people entering it for the first time as refugees to never to leave again. It's just, it's wild. And it's part of what makes watching this stuff so fascinating.
In an attempt to make Israel more acceptable, they were given work. Meanwhile, in Egypt...
Oh, great. These poor refugees were actually given work. Fantastic. I wonder if that counts as paid labor, if that's slavery.
Egypt, on the 28th of September 1970, President Nasser died. He was still regarded by millions of Egyptians as their savior. He was replaced immediately by President Sadat, who set about restoring Egyptian morale.
How do you set about restoring Egyptian morale? Like, I guess destroying Israel, maybe. It's funny how, like, most of the Arab states in this is just Israel. Like, this feels like a very Israel-Egypt-based conflict, even though it's all about Palestine. I don't know.
He began by building up the army's self-confidence.
Yeah, number one task on our to-do list, build up the army's self-confidence. What's so funny about that is the only reason they probably lacked self-confidence is because they got totally bodied by Israel in like 6 days, like... Is he building up the army's confidence, or is he just making them believe that they might actually be able to win, even though based on the evidence, they couldn't? It's funny to think that the entire Egyptian military had low morale after the 6 Days War. Like, you don't say. And like, you actually had to actively improve their morale by putting them on like a zip line.
Sadat was convinced that unless Israel was defeated, she would never withdraw from the territories she'd occupied in 1967.
See, again, that is like a wild thing, because I would have assumed the same thing. Like, Israel took all that territory from Egypt after Egypt declared war on them. Like, kind of fairsies to keep it, really, honestly. I mean, I guess Israel started that war, though. Isn't that what we learned? I don't know. I would not have expected the Israelis to return that land either. So the fact that they did, I don't know, that is a gesture of good hope on their behalf.
So on the 6th of October 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack
Dang, the 6th of October, 1973? Interesting.
on Israel.
Again, yeah, another invasion, this time led by Egypt and Syria. So this is like the third war. How many times did Egypt fight wars? See, that's the thing too. That's part of the propaganda is we're trying to be made to feel bad for Israel because they had to fight all these wars. And the only reason they had to fight all these wars is because they were starting their own little settler colony here that they never really needed to do in the first place. Whatever. I'm really trying not to pick sides though.
Because it was a Jewish religious holiday, Israel was unprepared, and the war was bitter with heavy casualties on
Oh yeah, wasn't like a Jewish holiday? Is it like Rosh Hashanah or something?
both sides.
Isn't that like the name of this conflict? Like the Yom Kippur War? That's what it's called, isn't it? What's this old flag? Hang on. What's this old flag? I want to see it again. It's not the Israeli flag, is it? Oh my God, I can't even tell what it is. It doesn't look like the Israeli flag or the United Arab Republic flag. I'm curious. Can somebody in the comments identify this flag for me, please?
The Arabs had fought better than ever before and made some gains, capturing a number of Israeli prisoners. But towards the end of the war, the Israelis succeeded in crossing the canal.
Is this the Sherman tank, the American Sherman tank that I heard about a second ago? It looks like an American tank, but I don't know if it's a Sherman or not or whatever. You know, it's just like, this is a sick piece of hardware for a military to have.
During the fighting, both the Russians and the Americans poured in vast supplies of arms and equipment to both sides.
That's another aspect that I feel like is just completely forgotten. Like these conflicts, while they are local conflicts, are still pieces of the geopolitical maneuverings of the Soviet Union versus the US, right? Like this is still just communism versus capitalism, just in a completely different arena, I guess. It's just, sometimes you think that the underlying struggle really is just the Israelis versus the Palestinians, but then you realize that like the Americans didn't really even care about that. We just didn't want communism, it's so complex of a conflict. And again, you don't ever think about how communism ever influenced the formation and, nationhood of Israel, but then you watch something like this and all that context is still preserved, and now you have a better understanding of Israel and the Arab states because of this. Again, I hope I'm selling you guys on why we watch this sort of stuff.
However, the Arabs used one of their own weapons most successfully: oil. The Arabs supplied America and Western Europe with...
Dude, I love these little maps though. The little America map and then the Arab world map, like the Maghreb or the Mashriq. I guess it's neither, but it's just so funny to see these little like Algeria, Libya, Egypt, like, I don't know. I love the little map animations and the Western Europe map animation too. Like you can tell like, is that Western Germany but not Eastern Germany? Just funny little details hidden in all these little animations.
Oil. Israel depended on Western support, especially weapons and money from America. When the 73 war began, Saudi Arabia tried to stop this Western support by doubling the price of oil and then cutting off supplies altogether.
Dang, that's crazy. So was that like when the, oil crisis started in the US? I remember learning about there being an oil crisis in like the 70s. Is that what we're talking about here?
To America and Holland. The war lasted 17 days, and at Geneva in 1973, Israel and her principal Arab opponents met for the first time to discuss the conditions of peace. The dangers of a confrontation between Russia and America had led them to impose a ceasefire on both sides.
Oh, whoa, is that Henry Kissinger? I think it is. Whoa, that's crazy.
Only Syria stayed away. What was the outcome to be?
We can make propaganda, or we can try to make progress.
Well, considering the fact that I'm watching propaganda, I think we might have done one and not the other.
The American attitude is clear. We know we are starting on a journey whose outcome is uncertain and whose progress may be painful. We are conscious that we need wisdom and patience and goodwill. But we know, too, that the agony of 3 decades must be overcome.
The agony of 3 decades. It's such a shame to hear that, knowing that it is much more than that now.
And that somehow we have to muster the insight and courage to put an end to the conflict between peoples.
What's crazy is that like all these guys in this room here to figure out this problem, and like they never did. They never figured out a solution. Still to this day, no solution in sight. You know, it's like you can get all the smartest minds, if you consider these guys the smartest minds in the world together, and you still can't figure out the Israel-Palestine problem.
Who have so often ennobled mankind.
I really should rewatch the program that I watched first for this channel, because that was such a good... maybe I'll do that next. If you guys are watching The Palestinian People Do Have Rights after this, then you will know that I followed through with what I was saying. Oh wow, that was the end right there. I was not expecting it to just end right there, I guess. All right, series consultant Bob Gunn, film editor. What a very dry way to end this program. I mean, I guess there's no fun way to end it, and I guess there is no end to this conflict, so there is no like conclusion they could have drawn to it. But I don't know, just to end with just credits immediately, I don't know. It doesn't do it justice, I don't think. But all right, I guess that was Israel and the Arab states. So I do think I learned a lot from watching this. I don't know how much of the information was tilted or slanted in one direction or the other. Obviously, I've said it many times, this is definitely propaganda. This is like the definition of propaganda, really. But I don't know how much of it I fell for and how much of it I was able to see through, because I do feel like there were things that I learned that I didn't quite know before, but everything that I didn't quite know kind of supported Israel more than it supported Palestine. And I think that's really the big problem I have with this. It's just that we didn't really get to hear from Palestinians or hear about Palestinians even. We learned more about the Egyptian power dynamic than we learned about the actual Palestinian people who were suffering at this time. So I don't think I could consider this like a fully neutral program on this issue, just because, again, yeah, we did not get to see the Palestinians. We got to see all the acts of terrorism the Palestinians committed, but we never got to see what caused them to go through with those actions. We never saw the crimes committed by Israel that I know they did commit, that in their minds justified these actions. And it's just without showing us, again, don't tell us that, Israel doing this justified them blowing up this plane or whatever, but just show us and let us, the audience, decide. That's really what I wanted to see. But because we didn't get that, little bit propaganda, little bit in favor of Israel more so than Palestine, I would say. But overall, I'd say this was also pretty fair. I don't know. I didn't feel like I heard any falsehoods, really. I just did not get all of the truths that I wanted, I guess. There weren't a lot of lies, but there weren't the important truths either. And I think that's what was missing. I wanted more. I wanted more from Palestine. I wanted to understand the Palestinian people more, because I feel like I understand Israel's perspective in all this. I feel like I understand that they think they're defending themselves and that they're inhabiting land that was always theirs or promised to them by God. But I did not get the same level of understanding of the Palestinian people's plight, which I think is a very important aspect of this conflict if you want to understand it, and especially if you want to ever find a solution. You have to be able to recognize the suffering that the Palestinians have undergone for tens of years, decades, ever since the beginning of Israel. There has been just, mass suffering on the Palestinians' behalf. So I don't know, pretty good. I would say I'm glad I watched this. I think I do understand Israel and the Arab states better now, but I don't think this is the end-all be-all for understanding this conflict. I feel like there is definitely more information there that we were not given that might sway some of us to feel differently about this conflict. So pretty good, but I think we're going to need to watch more of this sort of stuff. And hopefully I keep my promise and we watch The Palestinian People Do Have Rights. That is the very first program I ever watched for this channel. So I think next week, that's what I'm going to try to do, just so that we can compare and contrast them a little. Because without that context, none of this plays fairly if you don't also know what the Palestinians suffered. So that's what I kind of want to learn about next week. But if you want to support me and what I do here trying to learn from these old programs, you can do that by giving a donation to the Internet Archive. That is where I get all these old programs from. They deserve all the credit for this, not me. I am not the one preserving these films. They are. So if you want to support what I do here, support the Internet Archive, donate to them, or donate to, causes related to Israel and Palestine. I mean, I guess don't donate to both. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, but donate to one of them at least. I don't know. I'm not here to tell you which side to donate to, but if you want to help, donate. Donate to the Internet Archive or Red Cross or whatever else. But I think with that, I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say on this topic. So until next time, thanks for watching. Cut to black.